guys, and welcome back. I'm super excited today. We are interviewing Patricia Bates. She's a well-known historical romance author, but you may also know her by her pen name, Elise Wiles, who does paranormal also. I'm super excited for this interview because Patricia's been in the industry for 12 years now, and the amount of knowledge that she has is mind-blowing. I was actually on her podcast 2 weeks ago for an interview, and we had a really good conversation, and she got me a little bit thinking about screenwriting, and we're going to go into that in depth as well here, just even as a beginner, how even I, or maybe yourself if you're looking at doing screenwriting, go into that process and adapting your manuscript, and just the journey that she's had in her writing career, the difference between traditionally published and independently published, and just all the knowledge that we might not yet have, but we can learn from her. So let's go say hi and check it out. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Patricia. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you for having me.
No, I'm so excited to have you because you and I met for the first time only, what was it, like 2 weeks ago? And already I'm feeling best friend vibes.
Yes. Same. Yeah, we had an interview and it was such a blast. I'm so excited to have you back here soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited. Well, let's get straight into it then. My first question to you is, what's it like living in Canada, and what part of Canada do you live in?
I love living in Canada. It's very unique to live in Canada. It's something that I have to say I'm used to because I've never lived outside of Canada. But I currently live in central Canada. My husband and my son and I, we live in Saskatchewan. We are down in the southeast corner between Rocanville and Moosomin, Saskatchewan. And those are two small communities. Moosomin is a farming community, and Rocanville is a potash mine community. So it's kind of interesting because we are literally surrounded by farms and more farms, and then we have the mine. So it's really, I really love it. It's so nice. The seasons, definitely, we have 4 seasons, but you would never know it. We have what we call 2 seasons, which is winter and crop season. Because springtime is planting, and then of course we got the crops, and then we've got harvest. So we mark it by whether they're planting, whether they're harvesting, and how much snow is on the ground.
What is it now over there?
Right now, we are at the back end of harvest season. They are just finishing up thrashing and combining.
I want to know what gave you the inspiration, because you've now been publishing for 12 years.
Yep.
What gave you the inspiration to write your first book, Master's Mistress, and how did you find the initial publishing process?
So I had actually got the idea to write a Viking story, and then I got to thinking about it, and I'm like, well, I've got this girl in my head who's just, she's kind of, for want of a better word, she's kind of a kick butt kind of girl, but she's gone through a lot. So I started writing this, and Master's Mistress never actually was supposed to be published. It was just going to be one of those things that I was just going to write for myself. And then I got into it about halfway through, and I'm like, wow, I'm really liking this story. I'm really, I want to share it. So I joined a couple of groups, romance divas and stuff, and I had started getting some feedback and doing critique swaps and stuff. And so one of the things that I was learning was everyone that I was showing this to, they're like, you should publish this. You should really publish this. This is really good. And I was thinking, yeah, nobody really wants to read a story about a slave girl who's actually the last of her familiar line. Like, she's supposed to be queen, but she's a slave. And then I finished it, and my husband said to me, he's like, well, why don't you just, send it in? I mean, what is the worst that can happen? So I started looking around for publishers, and I had actually made a friend of mine who suggested the publisher that she had been working with. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll send it in and see what they say. And the worst that they can do is say no, right? So I sent it in. And about 6 weeks after I had mailed it in, I hadn't heard anything. And I'm like, yeah, it's going to be a rejection. So I get this email and I'm like, I don't want to open this. You better open this and look. And my husband's like, no, you open it. So I opened it. And the first words in the email were, thank you for sharing Master's Mistress with us. We would like to offer you. And I'm like, at that point, I'm like, no. So I'm like, no, this is no, this is, and then I'm like, yeah. And so I said to my husband, I said, they're offering me a contract. They're going to publish my book. He's like, I told you. So then I signed the contract, sent it in, and the rest, as they say, is history. But the actual process of going through the reading of the contract and then doing the cover art and the editing and getting it all ready for release was overwhelming. It was terrifying, because it was like every time I would get another round of edits, it's like, oh, are they going to change their mind? Are they going to change their mind? And then it was, I don't have any clue about promotion. I have no clue about how to market this. I have no idea what I'm doing. So by the time it came out, I was taking crash courses on how to promote, how to brag about my book without actually, being offensive, and really just trying to muddle my way through the first round of edits and release and all of this stuff. And then I kind of surprised myself, because it was right out of the gate. My first debut novel made bestseller list for the publishing house for the whole month. And I'm like, what?
Well done.
So I did something right, but then it was just like, okay, well, I have all of these other ideas floating around in my brain, and I have ideas in my storybook here that I've got. So let's give it a shot, and I haven't looked back since. So
how long did the process take you from the day that you got that letter saying, yes, we want you, to having your debut novel being published? How long did that process take you?
That process took me, I got that in the end of the summer of, I got that August, September of 2008, and my book came out into spring of 2009. So about 6 months.
Okay, amazing. Well, so that rolls in perfectly with my next question there, because I wanted to discuss, now that you've been doing this for 12 years, you've both traditionally published and you've both independently published as well. So I want to know, from somebody who's had the grass on both sides, shall we say, what do you think the focal features on both sides are?
I honestly, I think there's two vastly different processes between the two. Traditionally, publishing is, you are restrained in some ways, because you are basing everything based on your publisher's timetables, their time schedule, which, if you're planning pre-orders or anything along those lines, it makes it really difficult, because you just don't know, because there's so many factors. And sometimes you can wind up having a book being pushed back a week or a month, because something has come up that's outside of your control. So when it comes to traditionally published, like I say, there's a lot of the risk that's off of your shoulders, but at the same time, you have to be aware that you do not have full control over when it's going to be released. And even your cover isn't, you may have a vision for your cover, and that cover may not be what you finally end up with, because your publisher may have a different idea or have more experience with understanding what the market is going to call for. as opposed to independently publishing, where you are responsible for everything from your edits to your revisions to your cover art to making sure your blurb is full of the right keywords and all of that. But when you're independently published, you're also able to publish it on your schedule. So if you wanted to do a Christmas Day release, not that I would recommend it, but if you want to do it on Christmas Day, you can do it, and you're not having to worry about, what's going on with the publisher. And that's the other thing too, is as an independent publisher, you are working on one book or one series, whereas they could be working on the release schedule of 16, 20, 25. You just don't know how many books that they're working on at any given time. So those two factors really do. It really depends on how much control you want to have.
What would you say do you have a preference of one over the other?
Not really. I've had really positive, very positive experiences doing it both ways. And the publishers that I work with now who do publish my work are amazing. And I don't have a problem with, being pushed back. I actually have one publisher right now who we are actually doing a complete overhaul and relaunch of 2 of my novels that they are going to do. They've given me new covers. My editor is going to be giving me edits here pretty quick on Historical, the Viscount's Prize. That one is going to be released early 2021, and Master's Mistress is going to be re-released in August of 2021 as well. So I find that honestly, to me, there's not a lot of difference, because I feel like I'm still in as much control with the publishing traditionally as I am independently, because I have such a good rapport with all of my publishers. And I haven't experienced any one of them with delays or where they haven't been willing to give me the time to, plan a release party or some sort of event for releases. So
that's exciting. And also, I want to ask a question. So you just mentioned then that you have numerous traditional publishers. How do you find, I guess, managing that in the grand scheme of things? Would you have had a preference to only go through one, or do you find that it just is what it is and it suits for each of the different books that you have?
Well, I found early on, one of the experiences that I had early on in my career was that I was with a publisher that actually closed. And it was a bit of a trial to get rights back and that sort of thing. And I had discussed with some of the other authors, and I had talked to some of the authors who had a little bit more experience, who had been in the industry for a number of years, and they had all said the same thing. When it comes to publishing, if you're not doing it yourself, it's a really good idea to avoid putting all of your eggs in one basket. And I really took that to heart. Now, most of the publishers that I deal with, some of them are specific to a genre or specific to a series, or it's just something that I've kind of developed a rapport with. There is one publisher that I'm dealing with right now that I'm dealing with them specifically because of the genre that I'm writing in with those particular novels. But for the most part, it's just been really just making sure that while I'm not spreading myself too thin, I'm not randomly submitting to a new publisher every week. I'm very particular on who I'm dealing with, but at the same time, it's just being aware that things do happen and publishers close, and sometimes it's just easier if you have your work in multiple places. Then that way you're not struggling to recoup all of your, if a publisher closes, you're not trying to get all of your rights back all from one place, and it just makes it a little bit easier, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Speaking of different genres, I want to talk about pen names, because you do actually go under a pen name as well, because you write different genres. So under your paranormal, you go under Elise Wiles, and for your historical romance, you go under Patricia Bates.
Yep.
I wanted to know because a lot of authors do it, and I wanted to know what your specific thought process was in deciding to do that.
I had originally thought about doing the pen name because of the difference in the genres that I write in. Because I write historical romances, and then with the paranormal, those are paranormal erotic romances. And I thought, I've kind of already branded Patricia Bates as historical romance. It might be a little bit offsetting or off-putting to my fans if all of a sudden here's a book that is a little bit spicier than normal and features vampires and dragons and that sort of thing. So that's one of the big reasons why I decided to go with a pen name. And then I found with the pen name, I wasn't restraining myself with what I was writing. If I wanted to get a little darker, a little edgier, a little, more intense with my pen, under my pen name, I really felt like I could. It wasn't a matter of I'm struggling to justify how I'm writing or I'm restraining myself, because with my historicals, I tend to focus on historical details. I tend not to make them erotic. They are sensual, but they're not erotic. Whereas with the paranormal and the contemporary male stuff, that's a little bit more spicy, so to speak. So for me, it was branding and letting myself let the hair down and be a little bit wilder with the pen name.
Do you have I know authors hate it when I ask this question, but do you have a preference of genre you write between the two?
I love historical romance. That is my number one favorite genre. And you can tell because my paranormal romances are all set in Iron Age. They are all set under with monarchies, and it's all there is no modern conveniences to them. It's all sword fights and magic and dragons, and I've got one in the series that starts off as a contemporary, but it shifts quite early in the book. About a third of the way in the book, it shifts over. So they go from modern day Vancouver to the demon realms and the vampire realms, and so they're suddenly they go from cars and trucks and computers to swords and fire and magic and that sort of thing. And so it has carried over. There is a bit of that spillage from the historical into the paranormal. So yeah, but historical is my ultimate favorite, because I love history. It's one of I'm a history guru.
I want to talk a little bit before we started interviewing here. We started talking about one of the groups that you're a part of, which was resources for authors and helping critique their work and offering advice and suggestions. And I'm curious as to what you think the maybe top 3 common things are that authors don't really establish until they're a couple of years into their career, that they need that experience behind them to know. They won't know it straight away.
Well, I think part of it is just the craft itself, is gaining the experience with the craft itself. There is so many different ways to write, but there are certain things that once you get a little bit more experienced and you're a little bit more in depth and you've got a little bit more exposure to the craft itself, authors, especially the newer authors that I've seen that I've been working with, really are getting deeper into it. It's not as shallow. So learning the craft is a huge one. Understanding their brand, and really understanding what it means to brand their work is another one. I find that too, some of the newer authors and it takes a little bit to really get into, is actually understanding the genres and the subgenres, and really knowing you're not restricted. You can write a historical that is a fantasy. You can write a contemporary that is, space opera. You're not really confined to one specific genre, unless of course it's romance as a whole. And then of course with romance as a whole, there are some requirements, like does have to be that romance, that love interest. You have to have a happily ever after, or at least a happily for now. But I think that's the biggest thing is they just need that time and that experience to really develop their skills, develop the craft, and understand their branding and marketing, and really understand that when someone says, hey, you need to have this edited, it's not a reflection on the writing per se. It's just, you need to be releasing and showcasing the gem of your novel, as opposed to something that needs a little bit more polish.
I want to talk a little bit about screenwriting, because last time we spoke, you opened my entire world to the possibility of screenwriting and different manuscript adaptations. And so I personally am so beginner at this. And I was so intrigued when you were talking to me about it. And I was wondering what tips you would have for anyone here who, much like myself, has never even gone into it. Where do they even start for screenwriting?
Well, depends. If you're doing an adaptation, you want to make sure that when you start, the first thing that you're going to do is take just the dialogue from your novel. So your screenplay itself is basically your dialogue, your directions. It's not an in-depth retelling of your novel, and you have to understand exactly what you're trying to convey. So if you're doing an adaptation for a feature-length film, your screenplay is going to be different than if you were doing an adaptation for an hour-long or a half-hour-long TV spot. So you really have to understand that. What the game plan that you have is in mind. Beyond that, just there are a few things. You need to understand what the formatting is, because that is a huge aspect. For you to be taken seriously, you have to have your script formatted properly. If it's not formatted properly, you're pretty much not going to get noticed. You have to be willing to put in the time. It is a long game. So really working with the programs that are out there is really good. There are a few that I would recommend. If you're just starting out and you just want to learn how to do the formatting, get the formatting down to do the first adaptation, Trelby is absolutely fantastic. It's free, it's powerful, it's just as powerful as some of the other paid for programs out there. And it was actually recommended to me by my agent when I first started getting into doing the adaptations. She suggested it and said, this is a really good way to learn how to do the formatting, how to do all of those things. Then once you kind of have an idea of that, you want to look at your treatment and your Bible. Those are the other two parts of the process that you really want to understand how to put together, because that is where you're going to break down your scenes. That's where you're going to break down your episodes, where you're going to give your character information. So these documents, your treatments and your Bibles, are going to be the longest. If you're doing, so for example, we're going to use one of your books.
I'm okay with that.
If we were to use one of your books, now, for example, your books are a little bit longer. So that's going to be, we're going to do a full-length feature film. So your requirements are for your length are between 80 and 120 pages for your screenplay. So you want to make sure that you're going to have all of your dialogue down. You're going to transfer it from the novel to the program. Now, if you, at this point, if you go over that 120 pages, don't worry about it too much, because we're going to tighten it up, and there's going to be little bits and pieces that are going to just get cut because it's not relevant. It's not going to impact whether or not the actors or the producer who looks at it is going to be able to understand what you're trying to get across. So you're going to take once you've got all of your dialogue transferred over into the program and you've got it all formatted, you're going to, you're going to break it into your scenes, and you're going to do your fades in, fades out, your transitions, and then you're going to also do your stage direction, which is, for example, it would be your introduction scene. Introductory is, maybe the character is going to, is walking into this forest with fog rolling in, and it's dark and there's not a lot of light. There's just the odd moonbeam playing through the trees. That's it. You're not going to go into detail. It's not a retelling of the book. It's just basically stripping your book down to the very bare minimum, because the details that you want to include in there are actually going to come into play in when you do your treatment and your Bible. And then with your dialogue, because you're limited to the number of pages. So if you've got dialogue that maybe is like a secondary character, or is just like a one-line character, you might want to just cut that out, unless it's really vital to that scene, because you want to make sure that you don't go over the maximum, space that you're allowed, because it's, once you go over, it just, you wind up having to cut down anyway. So because if, in my experience at least, if you go over and you're longer than what you're supposed to be, most production companies won't even look at it, or agents for that matter won't even look at it. So that's in my experience. And then your treatment in your Bible is where you're going to physically put together, like I said, you break your scenes, you're going to break up your character information. All of that is going to be broken up and put into there, so that it's detailed. And your scene, when I say a scene, I don't mean it's a paragraph, 2 paragraphs of what is happening in that scene. I mean, it's detailed. This is what's going on, is happening. These are the people that are in that scene. Your Bible, your characterization is where you get really into depth, and you talk about height, talk about weight, whether the long hair, short hair, color of eyes, scars, tattoos, accents, all of that, because your Bible in that is where the actors, where the producers in that, once it hits or gets accepted, that's where they're going to be looking for the information on who they need to audition, and how they need to do that, and how they need to pick who to fit into each role.
I feel like we should do, maybe if you have time, a separate video on this as well sometime, because there is so much, you've got so much knowledge on it. And it's something that I feel like a lot of authors don't really have, I want to say, the opportunity almost. Like, obviously there's always stuff online and you can always go into these things, but I just don't think, like, for me personally, I've never really been exposed to it. And all the information you just gave me then was like worth $1 billion.
And there's so much more to it. Like, I mean, if you're, if for the viewers, if you're serious about doing an adaptation, before you get into it too deep, there's a couple of things I would strongly suggest. One, create an account on stage32.com. That is a must, because that is going to be your gateway to accessing resources that you're not going to get anywhere else, because that's producers, that's directors, that's actors, that's voiceover actors, that's agents, that's people that are in the industry that are networking. So that is a huge, huge resource for anyone who's interested in actually doing an adaptation and seeing about getting your work before a producer. And they actually do have pitch sessions through that site. So you're actually connecting one-on-one with producers, directors, actors, etc. And the other one is registering with the Writers Guild of America West, your script or your Bible, because it is so worth it. 90%, or actually it's probably about 98% of the producers and the people that I've talked to, agents, have all told me if it's not registered with WGAW, they won't touch it. And I can understand that completely, because it provides a level of comfort and security for both the author and for the producer. So making sure that you do those two things is going to be huge, because if you're on stage 32, you may actually network with someone who is, who is looking for what you've got. So that's huge. And really understanding it. And understand too that the whole process is not an instant thing. You may take years and years and years to actually get an options agreement. And options agreements aren't necessarily, they're a good thing, but they're not the end all be all. And I've heard some people talking, saying online, well, if my movie was made into a movie, I would make sure that I have all the rights. And, it doesn't work that way. But, it's a whole video. We could do a whole video for an hour on this. So
I'm excited. Okay. All right. Thank you. No more away. This is the teaser for that video. What for your career, what would you say that the most challenging thing has been, and what is your greatest accomplishment?
I think the greatest challenge for me has been consistency. Is really making sure that I'm doing my promotion, I'm doing my marketing, I'm reaching out to readers, I'm connecting with readers regularly, rather than doing it in bits and spurts and letting life get in the way. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I have, is really just being consistent with my promotion and marketing and that sort of thing, and making sure that I'm getting books out, if not self-published, then to my publisher in a timely-ish manner. I am a prolific author. I've always got something on the go, but I don't submit every 3 months. It can take me a few months. I can wind up submitting 2 or 3 books at once. But it really depends on where I'm at, emotionally, physically, and whether or not I'm to the edge of where I can't do anymore. And I think that's the biggest challenge for me, is just being able to pace myself, and that consistency of making sure I've got books coming out, I can promote, I'm doing my updates on my website, keeping that all straight. The biggest, I would have to say my biggest accomplishment is the fact that I have made it 12 years in this industry, and I haven't given up. I haven't said, no, I just can't do this anymore. There's too much, I'm not getting sales, I'm not getting reviews, I think that's been the biggest thing, is just really keeping myself focused and keeping myself engaged, and really knowing myself enough to know that, no, I can't give up. This is something that it feeds my soul. I need to do this.
I love that. And I think it's a very important discussion that everyone has to have. And I try and bring that openly on this channel, is that as authors or writers or any kind of artist, we all struggle. It isn't as beautiful as everyone makes it out to be. And a lot of people, I'm sorry, but some authors will outright lie and be like, I love doing this every day. And I have no doubt about that. But there are days where you have resistance against it, because it is a massive form of discipline to get down and to write every day. And then you do have outside contributions happening. And it can be hard, especially independently, when you're managing marketing and all of that. It's hard to juggle it all. So sometimes you really have to go deep inside and remind yourself as to why you're doing it, and connect back to the passion that you have for writing, because it's not just writing. And then there is an outside pressure as well from your readers that you've developed that relationship with. So that's a very real answer, I think.
And that was one of the big things that I learned, is that, you can disconnect and recharge those creative batteries, and it's not a negative. If you take a long weekend off, and you leave the computer off, you focus on other things, whether it's reading, whether it's crochet, whether it's getting out and going horseback riding for the day, whether it's sitting out at the campfire with the hubby and the kids and roasted marshmallows and wieners. If you do that, you are more apt to be able to engage and keep up to the goals that you set yourself. One of the other things that I have learned is not to set unrealistic goals. I have over the course of my career, I've learned that if I set myself a goal of 1,000 words a day, I can do 1,000 words a day. It may not all be on the same project. It may not all be new writing, but I can still do 1,000 words a day. If I set myself up to do 2,000 or 25,000 or 2,500 words a day, I can't do it. I cannot physically, my brain it just shuts down. And I was writing the other day on one of the new books that I'm writing. And I said, oh, I'm just going to do 1,000 words today. I worked this morning, I've got all this other stuff on the go. I'm only going to do 1,000 words. Just 1,000 words. Mm-hmm. I did my writing, and then I had something else come up, and I'm like, so I had to step away from the computer, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to save this. I'm going to see how many words I actually did, see how close I am to my word goal. I had almost doubled it. I did 1,800 words in this book, and I was like, yes. And someone that doesn't know me looks at me, and they would think I was crazy, but I was so pumped because it was just, I was sitting there, I was just, okay, 1,000 words, I can do that. That's 4 pages, and I'm just the words are just flowing. It was just like Mount Vesuvius of words here. And it was so wonderful. And then and I was just blown away. And it was realistic for me. I know authors that are doing 10,000 words in a month, and it's like, well, okay, or 10,000 words in a week, or they set themselves a goal for 50,000 words in a month. And that's great. But then they get discouraged when they go back to that, and they're looking and they're going, okay, well, I got to cut that out, and I got to get rid of that. And that's repetitive, and that's redundant. And yeah, you just set yourself realistic goals. Give yourself rewards is the other thing too, is if you set yourself goals and you make those goals, reward yourself, whether it's 5 minutes of watching furry little kittens on YouTube, or, finishing, that intense battle scene or whatever. Give yourself a reward, whether it's getting your hair done, your nails done, going and buying a new tube of lipstick, going and buying a new pair of shoes, or giving yourself chocolates. It doesn't matter what it is. If you put a reward system in for when you set those goals, you're more apt to meet them, is what I found.
Speaking of different projects, because we love numerous projects, because 1 or 3 or 5 isn't enough, I want to speak about your podcast, Distinct Authors. That's where you and I met. I came on about 2 weeks ago. We did an interview, and I had an absolute blast. And you're very much a person who has a mentality of giving back within the writing industry. So I want to know why you have that mentality, and also why you decided to do a podcast.
I think it's because I learned very early on, or I recognized very early on in my career, that I would not have gotten to the point where I was, or where I'm at, if I hadn't been willing to accept advice from others and help from others. So for me, it's a way of paying back. I think that if you are in this industry and you are serious about being in this industry and you want to make it a career, you have to be willing to give back as much as you take out of it. Because if you're not, it will eat you up and spit you out. Honestly, that's, to me, that's how I look at it. And I've seen authors that are very focused on what their work, they're, just get it done. They have those blinders on, and then they burn out. And it's, so as authors, we're not competitors. There are a billion people in this world, and out of that billion people, there are probably, 500 million that are readers. So if I look at everyone else that's writing as a competitor, it really is discouraging. And I don't like doing that. I like to think that we're all part of the same family, the same group, and I like to give back. So that for me is a huge thing. And like I say, it was one of those things I recognized very early on, because if I hadn't had someone say to me, well, submit to this publisher, I may never have taken that leap and done that, so it's just my way of giving back in that sense. It's, it just makes me, it feeds my soul. it just makes me feel like a good person. The podcast was a brainchild because I wanted a new way of giving back, of passing along the information that I had, the knowledge that I've got, that I've learned over the course of the last dozen years, and really a way of showcasing other authors, showcasing other styles, other work, and really encouraging that community spirit, and really encouraging people to see authors as individuals and not just publishing houses, or whether they're indie publishers, because it doesn't matter. If you're published, you're published. You're published author. It doesn't matter whether it's traditional, whether it's indie, whether it's a hybrid like I am. It's all about sharing your stories and sharing adventures, and connecting with your readers and connecting with your fans, and really making that connection. So for me, the podcast was another way to do that.
What would you say, and I guess like all of that is based on the power of knowledge as well, and learning as you go. And so it's really beautiful that you're offering that knowledge, because that's the best way that we're going to learn, is from person to person to person.
Yep.
I want to know what your 3 top marketing tips are.
Connect with your fan base. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to spend 8 hours sitting at the computer on Facebook. I'm talking about engaging with a newsletter, going and responding to a post that you've made on Instagram, Twitter, wherever you've made a post, actually responding to other people's posts, so if you're on Facebook and you see someone that's on your friends list, or there's someone that's made a post or asked a question, answer it. Really engage in that sense. Don't spend all of your time going me, buy my book, because that gets really old very fast. So engage and have your conversations, whether it's related to your work or not. Make it so that it's not pressure. There's no pressure. It's not, oh, well, I'm going to respond to you, so you better buy my book. It's not, no, that's the one thing you need to avoid. Be professional in your marketing. Do not, don't expect to post something this month and expect to be seeing sales in January. You want to be consistent. You want to be professional. You are allowed your opinions, but keep them to yourself, because when you're marketing and you're promoting your work and you're promoting your brand, you're also you're showing yourself as a public speaker, as a public person, and you want to really keep that in mind when you're dealing with the public. You don't want to be, putting your personal in with your professional. You want to keep that boundary in place. And the third one is ask for help. Do not, under any circumstances, figure that you are going to be the know-all, be-all. Everything is going to make perfect sense, because it's not. There are tons of resources out there. Avail yourself of them. Take advantage. There are so many free resources out there to show you, to guide you, to help you. Use them. And don't be shy to say, I don't know what I'm doing, and ask someone who maybe is doing a little bit better than you, or someone that you can, if there's someone that that you can trust, you can go to them and say, hey, look, I don't know what I'm doing, but can you give me some pointers? And really engage your network. Remember, other authors are readers too. So, just because an author writes in one particular genre, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the only thing that they read. They may read in other genres as well. So really, I would say that would be the top 3. For me, it would be the top points to remember for marketing.
What novel are you working on at the moment?
Oh, I got 5. I have a historical, which is completed. I'm just doing revisions and working with my critique group on, which is called In the Shadow of Rome. And it is about a gladiatrix and a gladiator There's some really cool twists and turns in this one. There's some secrets that come out about the domina and the slave woman, and yeah, so there I've got that one on the go. And I'm actually hoping to have that one out January or February 2021. I just started a new paranormal, which is dragon. It's a dragon romance, and that one I'm 2 chapters in, but I think that one's going to be a lot of fun to write because the hero is the sole surviving brother to the king who basically slaughtered everybody when their dad died so he could seize the throne. And the brother didn't want the throne. He's a protector. He's a warrior, not a politician. So he didn't want it. So, and of course he's an alpha. They're smaller than him, and yeah. So he's been banished. And the king realizes, oh well, he might come back and be a threat at some point. So he hires an assassin who happens to be a woman. To go after his brother because he figures, well, she's from a clan of hunters. Her clan is what they consider to be the apex predators of their world. They're the hunters, the assassins. They're the ones that they hired to go in and do the quiet kills. And it turns out that that's the assassin and the dragon brother are those are the love interests. And it turns out when she tries to assassinate him, it doesn't go quite as well as planned, and now they have to keep each other alive because they have to get rid of the king, but neither one really wants anything to do with the other because they just want to kill each other, but they realize over time that if they kill each other, they're killing their true mate. And so there's that one. And then I just started.
I'm excited for that.
I haven't just started, but it's a new novel that is actually a follow-up of my recent release, A Hunter's Desire. It is a paranormal romantic suspense, and what I've started is a menage book. It is a menage male. But the kicker is that the established couple are both ghosts.
Oh.
And yeah, so the third is alive. He's living. He is this young cop who comes to buy the house because there's something pulling him to this house. He buys this house. It looks like an old Georgian mansion. It's small town Saskatchewan. So he goes there, he buys the house, he dumps his useless boyfriend, and he's trying to solve this murder. And the victim in this murder is actually connected to the two ghosts because the guy that is murdered had a hand in murdering one of the ghosts.
Okay.
So it's a little complicated. And then, of course, the ghosts are both in law enforcement. The one was a cop. The other one was, he was a paranormal investigator. And so they're trying to help the other cop, the living cop, solve this case. And so as it gets further into the book, I start dropping hints of why Cooper, who's the living cop, was pulled to this house, why he is drawn to this house, and why he was drawn there, and why there's this deep connection with these two, because he doesn't know yet that his house is haunted. He knows that there's something going on because there's been instances where he's felt people touching him, where there's been people whispering in his ear. Him and his boyfriend got into an argument, and his boyfriend went sailing out the house and into the cow pies out in the corral. And he's like, I never touched the guy. What happened? So I've got that one on the go. And then I also have 2 more paranormals, which are written and are in revisions. Heart of the Underworld is a demist and a fae. And a demist is in the world that I've built in that particular series. He is a servant of both the god of the dead in the underworld and then the goddess of paradise. together, the god and the goddess, they rule the dead. One is for all those souls that are to be reborn, and then the other one, he's the one that has the souls that are condemned. And so this particular character, he serves both, and but he's also the king of his own realm because he serves both. And so he's both demon and mist, and the mists have the ability to transform and become fog-like, and they are, and with him, he's more like a paramistic cloud, like a volcanic eruption when he transforms. And he's pulled out of this deep sleep that he's been in, because he took a rest during a war, when the vampire queen was slaughtered. And so he's woken by this voice calling to him. Something is calling to him. A soul is calling, begging for mercy. And it turns out that the soul that's begging for mercy, that's calling to him, that's woke him up, is his true mate, is the one that's fated for him. Now, she is Fae and Nagli. And Nagli are shadow people. They survive in the shadows. They are sentient beings. They just you don't see them because they're shadow. And so she's from a very ancient line, and so she's kind of the last of this line, but she has been entrapped, and she's been caged, and so he's got to rescue her, and she's dealing with all these traumas and these things that she wants to get rid of, and so she's got to overcome her own, and he's got to kind of understand and overcome these things. Like, he wants to run in and be the hero, the protector, I can save you. And she's like, I don't want to be saved. You just need to go far away because I don't like you. So, and then the last one is another paranormal that I'm working on, and it's, I finished it, and it is Dragon and Vampire, and it's book 17 in the series. And she's actually related to the queens of the vampire realm, and he is a dragon prince, but he is allied with a warlord in the vampire realm, so he doesn't really go back to the dragon realm, which is probably a good thing, because he winds up getting himself into trouble because he gives her one of his hearts, because he's from a clan that has 2 hearts. And in their world, it's forbidden to share a dragon's heart. So he kind of makes a little bit of a foobar, and he doesn't realize that he's giving her a heart, because what winds up happening is she almost passes away, and she does what we call a spirit walk. So she's going to different realms, and he's along with her. He's trying to guide her back to her own realm to, because he wants her to survive. And so, so she's got they do this spirit walk, and in the course of the spirit walk, he doesn't realize that he winds up losing one of his hearts to her. And by doing that, it gives her dragon-like abilities. So she becomes really powerful, and the dragons don't particularly like that idea, because they're a little snobbish in some sense. They're very much, they don't want to see a vampire rule their world, but they don't understand that she's not going to take over their realm. And so so it's that one is done, but it needs a lot of trimming. I think I have to trim like 30,000 words.
Oh wow. That's so, you have a lot happening at the moment.
Yes. Yeah, I got a couple projects.
just a few. I want to know, this is always my favorite question to ask, what is the biggest goal for you? What are you chasing? What's the dream?
For me, the biggest dream would be to just to be able to write full time and make enough to survive and be able to live and do what I want to do, travel, I would love to see any one of my books made into movies. We are currently pitching Forsaken Heart, which is book 1 of Forsaken series, to production companies. I'm also pitching Master's Mistress to some production companies as well, to see if we can get either one of those picked up. So that would be really, really cool. I would love to see that happen. but yeah, I think that for me, the biggest thing would be able to just to cross that golden line and be able to write full time, travel, and not have to worry about, the common and ordinary things like, the bills and the dentists and all those things that we so eagerly embrace. But I think that would be the biggest goal that I have, is just to get to that point.
I always like to end it on a little bit of a couple of random questions. I have 5 random questions at the end. So the first one is, what is something you are absolutely terrible at?
Picking one thing. I am a multitasker. I do not have one project on the go at any given time. I have currently, like I said, I'm working on 5 books. I am also crocheting a pair of slippers and doing a Christmas village through crochet. I am launching my cover art business. I'm doing cover art now. I'm doing pre-mades and custom covers in ebook and wraps. I'm also doing teasers and other mock-ups through that business. So I think it would just be to have the blinders on and just to be super focused on one thing. I cannot do that. I've tried. Doesn't work for me. I'm horrible at it. I really am, because I get bored is what the problem is. I get super, super bored. If I'm doing the same thing over and over and over for an extended period of time, I get bored. I like to spruce it up and change up. So if I get bored with one thing, I move on to the next, and then I go back to whatever it was. So I'm bounced back and forth. That would probably be the worst thing I'm good at, or I'm not good at.
What is your favorite local snack?
Oh, well, I have a couple of them.
Tell me more.
I love pickled beets, which is probably not a snack for most people, but I really like them, and I love Saskatoon berries.
What's that?
Saskatoon berries, they're related to a blueberry, only they're sweeter, and they are they grow wild around here. We were lucky enough that we actually have a domesticated tree in our yard when we purchased our house. But yeah, it's like a blueberry, only better.
What's your favorite pastime activity?
You mean other than writing and crocheting and reading? Gardening. I love gardening. I also love horseback riding.
All right.
Yeah.
If you could be born in any time or era, what would it be and why?
Ooh, I have so many eras that I would be born in.
I knew this would be fun for you.
You know what? I have to say that I would probably Celtic Ireland.
Okay.
Pre-Viking, just because the cultural aspect, from what research that I've been doing, is absolutely it just entrances me. I love reading about the history. I love reading about the culture. So I think that would be it. Because again, I'm doing research for another book. But yeah, I would have to say ancient Ireland. Well, any ancient period, whether it's ancient Ireland. I'd love to go to Rome. Not that I'm particularly fond of some of the aspects of the Roman culture, but I would love to go to Rome. Pretty much any time in the history would be fun for me. I think, just because I love doing it. I love so much about it. It's so different, and it's so engaging. We've really romanticized history to a degree, so that we've kind of forgotten the negative aspects of history. And I think just to be able to experience history as it happened would be amazing.
What is the song that would best describe you?
Crazy.
Do you know that was?
I am just, yeah, no, I think that, oh, that's such a hard one, though, because I'm just so, like I said, I'm so driven. There's so many things that I like to do that I just, I don't think that there is one song that would fit, but I'm thinking Crazy probably would be, and I think if I remember correctly, Crazy was by Patsy Cline, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think. But yeah, I think that would probably be the number one song that would describe me, because I am not crazy, but I'm just, yeah, I am everywhere, and I'm everywhere and anywhere.
I love that. That's all my questions. Do you have anything else you'd like to tell the audience, or what we should be looking out for in the next coming weeks, months?
Well, if you're not already, please check out our Romance Writers Resource Group. We are doing the units, as I said. I am hoping, like I said, I'm actually hoping to have In the Shadow of Rome out early 2021. So if anyone is interested in being a beta reader or an ARC reader or being on my team, give me a shout. You can find me on Facebook. I am accepting additions to the team, and you do get some unique stuff I'm doing. I do give out ARCs, but I also do video chats with my ARC members. So that's really cool. And then Cooper's story, which is the Menage with the Two Ghosts, I'm actually hoping to have that one ready for beta readers by February of 2021. So I can get that submitted into the publisher by May of 2021. Yeah, I'm also, if you're an author and you're interested in getting a cover, I am actually doing a promotion right now in Romancing the Cover. There is a page, but there's also a group, and the group you have to ask to get in. But I'm actually doing a promotion. I'm going to be giving away a free digital cover with a possibility of throwing in a wrap for that cover as well by the end of this month.
Oh,
yes.
You'll have
so
to
I've got that.
And I'll put them down below.
Yes. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I've got on the go right now. I'm hoping to have everything lined up here pretty quick. If anyone is interested, I am actually going to be I'm in the process of organizing a scavenger hunt on Facebook for authors. So if any reader is interested, I am actively going to be sending out some invites to authors. Yeah, I hope you will join me for this, because we are going to be it's going to be for a month, and you're going to be getting free books, and there's a bunch of other stuff that's going to be going on. So look for that as well.
That's super exciting. That's fun.
Well, thank you so very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for hopping on, and I'm going to love you and leave you, and I hope you have a good day.
You as well. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.